Welcome to today's current events in the world that we are living in. I'm Pastor Chris Morgan, your host. Thanks for joining me today for this episode. In it, I've entitled it A Must See, The Origins of Environmentalism. You'll learn the origins of the environmental movement and its forerunner. More importantly, you'll learn why and how, through a carefully crafted plan of social engineering and programming, they believe the populations of society would accept their propaganda that the planet is struggling to sustain life. Through this disguise, however, the agenda is revealed, which is them controlling every aspect of our lives on the way to a world government under the UN central direction. Now pay careful attention as you're about to hear titles and terms like the Club of Rome, nationalization, world governance, the New World Order, which they call a world of communism, the SDGs, or better known as the Sustainable Developmental Goals, the New Green Deal, which you'll find is not new at all, Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, pollution, global warming dangers, and environmentalism. We'll begin with exposing the Club of Rome and the origins of the environmental movement itself. Next, exposing this fraudulent plan and the masterminds behind it. And lastly, the disguised selling point of even equality.
The Club of Rome, in 1972, implemented Stalin's collectivization policy on a global scale. Instead of goon squads going around the Russian countryside and seizing crops from farmers, these same resources would be controlled by world governments under nationalization, which means the transfer of privately owned resources to the state. The Club of Rome would be the forerunner to Agenda 21-30, Future Sustainable Development Goals, and the Green New Deal. According to F. William Engdahl, in his book A Century of War, the findings of the Club of Rome were based off a scientifically fraudulent computer simulation, titled Limits to Growth. Its findings were that the population of the world would perish because of lack of resources, so there was a need to curtail population growth by stopping economic growth. However, according to Engdahl, the creators of the computer simulation chose to ignore the progress of scientific and farming innovations, and production methods, which increase crop yields. The Club of Rome findings resulted in Henry Kissinger's 1974 National Security Council Study Memorandum 200, which targeted the economic growth of mainly third world countries, whose economic development posed a threat to the American-British Round Table central banking system. These countries would be deindustrialized to stop their populations using natural resources. This meant stopping irrigation, power projects, and getting rid of factories. This resulted in the economic ruin of African, Asian, South, and Central American countries, causing widespread poverty and starvation. Harsh measures, which, according to Engdahl, equaled the measures imposed on Germany after World War I, were applied on third world countries, forcing them to take IMF loans, and sell their resources to multinational companies that were controlled by the American and British Round Tables. To sum up, countries with high economic potential were a national security threat to the New World Order. It's important to note that Western countries were also targeted under Kissinger's plan, to limit their economic growth. The 13 target countries named by Kissinger's study were Brazil, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Egypt, Nigeria, Mexico, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, Turkey, Ethiopia, and Colombia. Engdahl said, the final result of this fraudulent sinister plan, can only be the destruction of Western nations as well, including America and England, because their populations also consume natural resources.
Ladies and gentlemen, the origins of the environmental movement as we see it began back in 1968, when the Club of Rome was formed. The Club of Rome has been described as a crisis think tank, which specialises in crisis creation. The main purpose of this think tank was to formulate a crisis that would unite the world and condition us to the idea of global solutions to local problems. In a document called The First Global Revolution, authored by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, On pages 104 and 105, it stated, "In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers, of course, will be caused by human intervention that will require a global response." That's the origin of global warming, ladies and gentlemen. In 1992, former President of the United States, George Bush Sr. said, "Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action will be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level." In 1992, Maurice Strong, Secretary General of the UN Earth Summit and member of the Club of Rome, said, "It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, ownership of motor vehicles, small electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable." Put those statements together with the previous one, and it must become clear that Agenda 21 is about controlling every aspect of our lives: how we eat, what we eat, how much we eat, how we move around, food production, the amount of food, and where we even live. Fear of environmental crisis would be used to create a world government and UN central direction. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, therefore contributes to social injustice. In 1972, the Club of Rome published the alarmist Limits to Growth document, warning of worldwide overpopulation, the need for sustainable development. This was the beginning of the slow process of social engineering and programming people to accept that the planet is struggling to sustain life. On the 8th of October 1973, the New York Times reported a quote from Ted Turner, also Club of Rome: "The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in human history." In 1987, Mikhail Gorbachev, also member of Club of Rome, said, "We are moving toward a new world order, the world of communism, and we shall never turn off that road." He also quoted in 1996 Monetary and Economic Review on page 5, "The environmental crisis will be the international disaster that will unlock the new world order, one world government." In 1992 came the Earth Summit, which produced the document called the Earth Charter. This document was co-written by Maurice Strong, long-time globalist, elitist, member of Club of Rome, and Mikhail Gorbachev. Both Strong and Gorbachev stated that it was hoped that this document would be adopted as the new 10 Commandments, with environmentalism as the new one world religion. Out of this summit came Agenda 21. Ted Turner, who is also a member of the Club of Rome, was quoted as saying in 1996, "The total population of 250 to 300 million people is ideal. That means a reduction of 95% from present levels would be even more ideal."
The connections between Karl Marx and the Rothschilds, it cannot be overstated. I mean, essentially, the Rothschilds are the creators of Marxism. And you note on page 225 that their goal is the elimination of all rights to private property. Now, we can see these talking points coming out at the World Economic Forum. You will own nothing and be happy, they say. Their other goal, the demolition of the family and the destruction of religion. These are the ideas of Karl Marx, and these are the goals of the Rothschilds in the World Economic Forum. So it is truly a return to 14th century serfdom. That's what they want for human beings. And what's funny is they try to sell it to us with the word equality, right?
Yeah,
So,
of course.
as good-natured people, the dummies will believe, oh, well, they want to lift up the third world. No. Under United Nations Agenda 2030 policies, and by the way, the Rockefellers donated the land in New York City upon which the UN headquarters sits. They don't want to raise up the third world. They want to drag us down to the third world. They want us living as slaves, everybody on the planet, thereby we're all equal. That's their idea of equality, Fergus.
Climate deniers, people who believe climate change is not happening in any meaningful way, are sometimes painted in the media as fringe characters, as kooks. So this might shock you. A man who co-founded the Weather Channel thinks climate change is a hoax. His name is John Coleman.
Hello to all your viewers. I resent you calling me a denier. That is a word meant to put me down. I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear, Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now. Hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see...
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN. But I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
Some may wonder why I do this. Well, in Matthew 24, Jesus himself warned about the coming deception that's coming to this earth 5 different times. So I believe if we care, if we love, we warn people. We don't just say it won't affect me and oh well. We must know there is a storm on the horizon and it's fast approaching. And I always say to be forewarned is to be forearmed. We do not need to be overcome with evil. We need to overcome evil with good, as Romans 12:21 says. And as Ephesians chapter 5 lets us know that we expose the unfruitful works of darkness through the truth. We must know the truth, for the truth sets us free. And that goes back to the Word of God, which lets you and I know that God loves us and has a wonderful plan. It's called the Great Plan of Redemption. He wants us in His family and not be deceived about the things that we see on this earth. Hey, I'm Pastor Chris, your host. Thanks for joining me for this episode. I'll see you again soon, and I call you blessed.